Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Leverett Ball Show. And on this episode, I am joined by J.J. Birden. And NFL fans, you likely remember him from his time as a wide receiver. He played for multiple teams, but his career really took off when he was with the Chiefs. And JJ has also done a lot since retiring from football in the motivational speaking and entrepreneurial worlds. And JJ, I know you've been a busy guy lately. You just launched a new website. I mean, how have things been going?
Yeah, things have been going good. Leverett, thanks for having me on your show too. It's nice to be able to share with your audience. But yeah, no, I went through a pretty huge rebrand. I've been a professional speaker the last about 10, 11 years, and I just decided to change up my brand, my message, and really try to create something that was very authentic to me. And we came up with the brand Beat the Coverage because that was my life as a wide receiver. It was like identify the coverage. Is it man or zone? And then find the holes and maximize it. So I just felt like that relates to people because everybody deals with coverage. It's something between them and their goals. So we officially launched it last week. But no, I'm excited. It took a lot of time, but we got it the right way. We did it the right way.
Well, and that's awesome. That you're able to relate kind of your experiences in the NFL to what other people go through because not everyone plays in the NFL, but everyone has different obstacles and challenges they have to overcome. Now, also, I'm curious, the rules in the NFL in recent years have changed as far as like, you know, they're stricter about not letting guys hit defenseless receivers and unnecessary roughness and different things, and you're not allowed to hip drop tackle. I mean, was it even harder when you were playing because as far as beating the coverage because defenders could basically try to kill you the whole time?
Yeah, it was. The rules were a little different back then. And when you're 157 pounds, like I was, yeah, DBs would try to maul me on the line. They were trying to always grab and get their hands on you. And then you always had to keep your head on a swivel because guys like Ronnie Lott and Steve Atwater and Junior Seau, they could just take free shots on you, and they did. The game was much more physical, and you had to be concerned with where you were on the field. But I would have loved to play with today's rules, though.
100%. And I feel as though, it's maybe the current rules are a little more offense friendly than some of the
Yeah.
rules in the past. But, obviously, like I said, you're doing a lot currently, speaking and with your business. But let's actually rewind a little bit. So, you mentioned kind of some of the things you had to overcome getting into the NFL. And really, I guess maybe overcoming doubters was something that started prior to your NFL career. Because I know coming out of high school, most colleges were recruiting you for track and not football. And then you ended up going to Oregon for track and also walking onto the football team. And then, when you were first drafted into the NFL, you're drafted by the Browns in the eighth round. I mean, the NFL doesn't even have eight rounds in their draft now. So as a guy who wasn't recruited coming out of, high school and then was a late round pick, I mean, you went on to, have a very successful career. And your career really took off with the Chiefs. But what was kind of your mindset you had, when you were doubted coming out of high school and then doubted entering the NFL in order to prove people wrong?
Yeah, I always had been a smaller guy, even from grade school. I was always the smallest, and throughout my years in school. But even as a football player, my senior year, I was the number one wide receiver. But like you said, colleges didn't think I could play, or at least Division One did not think I could play at that level. So I carried an underdog mindset. It's like people saw me as an underdog. I never felt I was the underdog, but I was going to use that to my advantage because I could not control my size, but I could control how I showed up. I could control my preparation. I could control my effort. And that's really where I focused. But I'll honestly tell you, I wasn't trying to play in the NFL. I was not that kid who grew up saying, "Hey, I want to be in the NFL." That was never my goal. It was just a series of, you know, unfortunate events took place once I got drafted by Cleveland and I tore my ACL. And I was like, well, let's see what we can do. But like you said, it wasn't until year three that I realized that, okay, we can do this. I belong here. So I went through a bit of a process, but just having that underdog mindset, I knew I was going to prove the doubters wrong.
Well, and you mentioned also you maybe at one point didn't think you'd play in the NFL, and after the Browns drafted you, you hurt your knee, and that actually cost you a chance to qualify as a sprinter for the '98 Olympics. And like I said, I mean, all of your offers coming to high school are for track, not football. Did you think maybe you'd be an Olympic sprinter? Was that kind of the initial plan?
Well, and actually I was a long jumper, and I I kind of had this. I had a plan, and I figured that I knew I could get a Division I track scholarship because I was a good long jumper. And every school that recruited me, every D1 school, I would ask the coach, "What do you think about me trying football one of the years?" Because I had this plan. I was like, "I'm going to walk on and prove everybody wrong, and then finish track." And Oregon was the only D1 school who didn't think it was a crazy idea, and they said, "If you come and run for the Ducks." And you can convince our head coach, Rich Brooks, you can walk on the second year, but not the first year. And I just saw an opportunity. Now I had to create it though, too. I had to beg the coach and literally beg the coach to let me walk on. And I wore him down and he finally did. And I guess you could say the rest is history.
Yeah, I mean, that must have been really easy convincing him to tell, oh, at football, it has no injuries. There's no risk at all. I mean, he's probably all over it. But I mean, that's cool that that you stuck with it. And I talked about how you kind of had to fight your way into the NFL, and it was Marty Schottenheimer who was the coach of the Browns when they drafted you after the Browns, you were on the Cowboys practice squad, but you were reunited with Coach Schottenheimer with the Chiefs, and that's when your career took off. And I believe in '93 that was when you had your career high with 51 receptions. And I mean, what was that transition like? You've been in NFL camps and been on practice squads, but then to actually become an impact player.
Yeah, it was an interesting journey because, like you said, the first year I tear my ACL ligament, I'm on IR. I get healthy. They cut me. I go to Dallas and I practice every day. And Jimmy Johnson just didn't feel I could play at that level at when the season was over. But I knew, Leverett, I knew I could play. It was just let's get the knee 100% and then choose the right team. So when I went into that third year, I had several teams after me, but I felt Marty Schottenheimer, who drafted me in Cleveland, would give me the best opportunity. Plus, I ran a 4.3, and when I went out to the Chiefs, I noticed that they had no receivers that were running under 4.5. So I thought, here's my competitive advantage. Use this speed, and like you said, that's when the career took off. And never in a million years that I think I played 9 years, but it was such a great experience, and I learned so much.
Well, and I mean, you seem like a pretty positive guy, and I mean, you have to be positive to be a motivational speaker. But when your career started to take off, did you ever have any temptation to maybe call some of the NFL coaches who doubted you and college coaches who didn't recruit you and be like, "Hey, remember me?"
Well, that crossed my mind, but I always realized that my play on the field would provide the response. I can remember specifically my third year with the Chiefs. I was a starter now, and we were playing Dallas. And I remember we go to Dallas and pregame, the wide receiver coach, Hubbard, I remember he comes up to me and he goes, and I had scored a 72-yard touchdown the week before. And he says, "Man, we were watching a film on you and we didn't know you could run like that." And I said, "Well, you didn't ever give me a chance." So it just felt good to see coaches like that who realized that, okay, well, maybe we should have gave him a better opportunity to make this team, to be on this team.
No, 100%. And it's funny. I remember watching an interview with Maurice Jones-Drew that he did. It was I think it was on like NFL Network, but he talked about when he came out of college, teams thought he was too short, and so he was doubted coming into the NFL. He said he literally has a handwritten list of people who
Mm.
have doubted him, including like draft analysts on TV who criticized
Oh,
his height coming out of college. I remember in the interview he said everyone on that list is going to get a phone call someday. But I guess in your
that's
case,
good.
your way of making a statement was just with your play. And I think that does speak the loudest out of all of the different ways you can maybe get back at some of your doubters. But then, after, you retired, I mean, you're obviously doing a lot now with your speaking and your work in the business world. And you also put out a book. But I mean, what was it like initially transitioning? I mean, was that lots of like pro athletes I've interviewed who, have told me that it was really hard at first leaving their sport. I mean, what was it like for you transitioning from the NFL into what you're doing now?
I think I'm very unique when it comes to former players and transitioning because, like I said, I didn't expect to play. So every year I was there, I considered a privilege. Man, I'm not even supposed to be here, but I'm here. So I would just take it year by year, but I was always planning for life after the game. I was networking and meeting new people in businesses and coaching settings because I wanted to make that transition successfully. So when I got to year nine, I said, you know what? I played 9 years. I'm not even supposed to be here. Let's end the career and begin life after the game. And I had opportunities that were lined up. I just couldn't really decide 100% what I wanted to do because I wanted to coach, but I didn't want to live a coach's life, you know? So I did some coaching in high school, and then I had a couple of businesses I ran for about 10 years in the medical fitness equipment industry. But I realized I wanted to help people. And as I started realizing how unique my journey was in the NFL, and I don't know if you know this, but in the last 35 plus years, there's not been an NFL player who played longer than me that weighed under 160 pounds.
Wow.
That put me in a very unique category, but I thought, how many people out there have dealt with doubt, obstacles, adversities, people don't believe in them, and I knew that I had a message that I could pour into people and help them achieve the goals that are important to them, and it's why I became a professional speaker.
One, you mentioned that no one played longer than you, weighing under 160 pounds. There have been some 175-pound kickers who have played for over a decade. I guess we need to get these musclehead kickers out of the weight room. If they're that big. But I mean, you mentioned also you were always networking while you're in the NFL and preparing for life after football. And obviously, I would think that being in the NFL would be a great networking opportunity, and you meet certain people and have certain opportunities come your way because you're playing. But do you think some guys in the league don't really do that and they don't think about their post football life until after they retire?
I believe so. I do believe players have gotten better today than they were when I played because the world of social media, internet really creates so many opportunities. But yeah, that's it's one of the advice I give players when I know players who are playing league. I say start preparing for life after the game from day one. I say because you will be a former NFL player a lot longer than an active player, and so yeah, I believe some players are doing a really good job at it, and maybe some aren't. But today's world, man, professional athletes have so many opportunities, and I would hope that they're all planning for life after the game. But one challenge is that some players, that's their identity. They were raised to play in the NFL. That was their goal. That's their identity. And I just think some have a difficult time transitioning to normal life because they've only been used to one thing. Where for me, I was planning for it every single day. And so I was ready to make that transition.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And also, I mean, as far as some of the things you're doing now, with the motivational speaking, I mean, I know you sometimes speak with corporations, but I mean, what are the some of the main events that you speak at and some of the main people that you speak for?
Well, I have carefully positioned my message so that it really can apply to anyone. So I focus more on business professionals in the corporate world. So, I mean, Leverett, I've spoken to every industry. It could be medical, it could be financial, it could be, teachers, it could be whoever, because like I said, everybody faces coverage. Everyone faces challenges, competition, self doubt, you name it. And so I've had the privilege of speaking in so many different industries and making my, how do you put it, my success tips and my winning strategies really applicable to anybody in the audience.
Well, and also, I mean, you're the author of "When Opportunity Knocks: 8 Surefire Ways to Take Advantage." Is it kind of a similar message there, as far as some of the things you learned from football and how they can apply that to their day to day life?
Yeah, that one is slightly different. Where beat the coverage is more of a framework. Here's 6 steps to be able to beat the coverage in life and business. Seize your opportunity really focuses on seizing the opportunities that we have in life. Because an opportunity could be anything. It could be something you have to do, you want to do, you need to do. And I think I'm the poster child of seizing and creating opportunities. And so that message is more about what it is that you want, what is the opportunity you have. Now, let me give you three principles on how to achieve that. So it's nice to have, that beat the coverage keynote, then have seize your opportunity, and then have winning as an underdog. And that's really just more specifically about how to win as an underdog.
Well, and people are sometimes underdogs in a lot of different things, not just in, sports. And people are doubted when they set goals in lots of different types of careers. I mean, also, it's funny because one of a guest I had on this podcast recently had also written a book. It was a guy named Ryan Dusick, who used to be the drummer in the band Maroon 5. And
Okay.
he wrote his book about when he had an arm injury, he was voted out of the band because he couldn't drum as well anymore. And so they voted him out of the band. And he wrote a book about the disappointment of that because he said that not everyone has been voted out of a band, but a famous band, but everyone's had some type of disappointment or setback in their life. And it's for anyone dealing with any type of disappointment. And for you, you relate your life experiences from football to everyone's different life experiences they have. But I'm curious, people can't necessarily feel as though they relate to a drummer in a famous rock band or an NFL player. So how do you get through to, because in a lot of ways, your life experience is like that of people in 9 to 5 jobs, but how do you
Yeah.
show that to people who maybe think they can't relate to you, and maybe people will think that if you're a pro athlete life is easy, and
Right.
don't really understand what it's like. How do you relate to people whose lives are different?
Great question. I try to humanize it and just make sure my message is relatable to them. But like you said, when you get on stage and they know you're this NFL player, but I tell you the one thing that works in my favor, when people see me walk on stage, they're like, "What? You're too little to play in the NFL." So they see me
Right.
as this regular guy instead of this big guy. So then when I start presenting to them and I start helping them understand that, these are winning strategies and success tips that allowed me to play in this game. We're only 1,696 men on an active roster every week. I said, but the challenge is not just making it to the NFL, but staying in the NFL. And I said, these are the principles that allowed me to play as long as I did, and I can relate them to you. And so, what I'll do is I'll take those principles and then I'll relate it. I'll relate it to family. You're a husband, you're a wife, you're a parent. How can these principles help you? You have a job. How can these principles help you? So, I've spent a lot of time, as one woman told me when she sat at my presentation, she said, "You know what? When I knew it was a football player, I thought, I don't even like football. What is he going to teach me?" And she says, "This isn't really about football." I said, "No, we're just using principles from football that relate to everyday life." And I think I've done a really good job of that because people look at me more as like, yeah, this guy played in the NFL, but he has real experience, real insight that can help me every day. Now, let me just say this too. I do share about my family because I've been married 35 years, have three children. My wife and I adopted five nieces and nephews, eight children. When I tell stories like that, people just, wow, it's just a regular guy, but he's done some pretty incredible things as a family head. And then I tell them my business experience too, the companies I own. So they get to see that this guy isn't just a football. He's a father. He's a husband. He's been a business person. He's been a salesman. Now all of a sudden I become more relatable to them.
Well, and I think it's definitely true. Like playing sports teaches you lessons that translate into other parts of your life. So it probably helped you, being a family man, being a businessman. And that's definitely true for me. I mean, I never played anything in the pros, but I played two sports in college, and lessons I even learned from that translate into all kinds of different parts of my life. So, that makes a lot of sense. And I mentioned, how you had to fight to get in the NFL and how you got injured your first year, but when you're speaking to these people and talking to them about adversity, I mean, what would you say is probably the toughest thing you've had to overcome, whether it was on or off the field?
Yeah, I think it's just adversity itself because when I tore my ACL ligament, I understand this. I got drafted late. I didn't think I'd get drafted. I got drafted. It was the middle of my track season. I had qualified already for the 1980 Olympic trials. So I go to the Cleveland Browns mini camp just so that I can say I went and I don't want to regret it later, but not to play. And I tore
Yeah.
my ACL ligament up. So that was my first kind of really test of adversity. But one thing I learned at that moment was, when adversity strikes, instead of making excuses or pointing someone or having the pity party, ask yourself, what can I learn from it? Why did this happen? How can I turn this into an opportunity? And I'll tell you what, when Dr. Bergfeld told me that if I work harder, I can come back faster than I was like, dude, that's the goal. And so I worked so hard in the rehab. Before the rehab, the injury I was running 4.38. Afterwards, I ran a 4.33. So I focused on what's the lesson I can learn. And that's the thing I try to tell everyone. When you deal with what I call FASCO moments, failures, adversity, setbacks, challenges, and obstacles, always ask or seek it with curiosity. What can I learn from it? Why did this happen and how can I turn this into an opportunity? And it's that growth mindset that positions you for something even bigger and better.
100%, 100%. I think that's a great message, for our audience. Something I think you do learn a lot of very valuable lessons also through some of your worst experiences in life. And so I completely agree with that point. But, with everything you have going on with the website, the speaking, everything you're involved in, I mean, what are you most excited for on your schedule in your future?
That's another good question. You're asking some good questions here, making me think. No, I'm just really excited about this new brand because I've been speaking for a while, and this is the first time that I really have a brand that represents me, and I can build an entire speaking platform, coaching series, a book around. And I want to become known as the guy who beat the coverage. And that's what I'm really excited about because I've done well speaking, but I want to get to the next level. And to get to the next level, I had to hire next level people. And I work with the PR firm, I work with my website team, and we came up with that brand together. And I think it's going to really uniquely position me in a very overcrowded motivational speaking industry so I can help more people.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And also a kind of a two-pronged question. If anyone listening wants to follow you on social media, what are your social media handles? And also if anyone wants to come and hear you speak or hire you as a speaker, how can they go about doing that?
Yeah, Leverett. So the best place first would just go to my website, jjbirden.com. That's the hub. You can access all my social media from there. I'm very active on social media. I love to share value. Just look for J.J Birden. I have the same username everywhere. I have a newsletter I just released on there too, if anybody wants some extra insight. But yeah, that's the place to hire me. And that's where a lot of companies will go. And because the way I designed it so they can get a feel for my message and how I can help people and what's the transformation. So yeah, jjburden.com is the place to be.
That's awesome. So everyone definitely check out the website. And, before we wrap things up, also, I mean, for anyone listening, as far as, beating your coverage, as far as overcoming obstacles, if there's someone out there who is pursuing certain goals in their corporate career or maybe going through hard times personally, what would your message be for them as far as, the principles they need to use to get through it and what their approach should be?
I would give him probably my 6 steps, my framework for beat the coverage, because no matter who we are, no matter what field we're in, we all face coverage, like you said, obstacles, pressure, competition, change. And what I would tell everyone is focus on these 6 steps. One is know the field, be aware of what you're involved in and what you're facing. The second thing is find the hole. Every situation, there's a crack in the coverage somewhere. There's something you can take advantage of. Play to your strengths. Lean into your strengths and lean into what you do well. Draw up a game plan so you know how you're going to achieve that goal. And then be willing to put in the reps because that's where you get better. Practice, practice. And then lastly, you got to execute. You got to be able to produce. but be ready to adjust because life will throw you a curveball and you got to be ready to call an audible.
100%. Yeah. I mean, calling audibles is a big thing in life. Life typically doesn't go the way people plan. So,
Yeah,
and maybe even for you, maybe you initially thought you'd be, doing track in the Olympics, but, many years later in the NFL, things went
I
differently.
know.
But,
That's just, I marvel at today. I'm just like when I said I never really in a million years thought I'd play in the NFL, I didn't. But I'm very proud of it now because it's a, it's the number one sport in the world, and it's not easy making it to the NFL, let alone stay there. So I'm part of a very unique fraternity, so to speak.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, they do. Some people say NFL stands for not for long. So the fact that you
Yeah.
played for as long as you did, is amazing. But everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. And once again, that was J.J Birden. Definitely check out his website if you're interested in signing him up as a speaker. But once again, everyone, you've been listening to the Leverett Ball Show. Thanks for tuning in.